I'm going to be talking to you today about this topic of insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. We seem to be hearing a lot about it, reading a lot about it. It's all over the media, and it is what is causing all the problems. This sort of big epidemic of what we call non-communicable diseases. And I always do like to tell stories, so let me tell you the story of this young woman. And you can see her sort of through the different age spans. And let me quickly go through her story. She is just about 17 years old at this point in time. No really health problems so far. She's just finished school, just joined college. She does have a complaint of irregular periods, but the family is not very worried about it. She does get her periods about once in 45 days to 60 days. She has gained a lot of weight, and this is something we see commonly in children, both boys and girls, around the time that they write their public exams, both in the 10th and in the 12th. Because of the stress of the exams, the lack of exercise, very poor eating habits at this point in time, they tend to gain a lot of weight. And also once they go from school to college, there is a reduction in physical activity. And again from college into the workplace, again a further reduction in physical activity, and they tend to gain a lot of weight. But otherwise they are healthy, they feel fine, you know. And this is the same girl when she's about 32. She has just conceived. And as with a lot of young mothers, young professional mothers now, they tend to postpone their pregnancies till about their early 30s. And she did require some treatment for conceiving. Again, I think particularly women living in urban areas tend to face problems with getting pregnant more and more. She has gained 6 kilos in the first 2 months of pregnancy itself. And because of this, her obstetrician told her to check her blood sugars, and she was told that she's developed diabetes in pregnancy. Again, this pregnancy diabetes, or what we call gestational diabetes, is something that is happening very commonly. We come to the same lady at the age of 55. Now, the little baby that she had when she was 32 years old is grown up. She's looking for the perfect groom for the child. She has a lot of tension related to her family matters. She ignores what she thinks is a gas complaint, and she gets admitted to the hospital with a heart attack. Now, this is nothing new. The story that I'm telling you about this girl from the time she's 17 till the time that she's now 55, it's nothing new at all. The reason I'm sort of presenting this story in this way is just to see if there is anything that we could have done to prevent this, this progression from the time that she was 17 till she's 55, where she's landed up in the hospital with a heart attack. Is there anything that could have been done to prevent this episode of a heart attack? And the answer is yes. There is a big link between gaining weight, particularly around the tummy area. And you can see the picture on the left. This gentleman has gained a lot of weight. This is what happens to us, what is called the midlife spread, or the prosperous tummy. It goes by different names. So we all tend to gain weight, particularly around the midriff area, men and women. Women particularly after pregnancy and childbirth. So what is the link between this excess weight gain, particularly around the tummy area, and developing a heart attack, or in fact developing many, many problems? This weight gain around the tummy leads to multiple problems, including irregular periods when you're younger. So this little bit of weight gain that this girl had when she was 17 years old was what was responsible for her irregular periods. It was what was also responsible for her difficulty conceiving when she was in her 30s. It was what caused her diabetes when she was pregnant, led to her developing diabetes later on in life and high blood pressure. And finally, it was what actually also caused her to have a heart attack by the time she was 55. There is also more and more evidence linking this increase in body fat to development of multiple other medical problems, including the most dreaded one of all, cancer. It also increases the risk of things like stroke. It increases the risk of arthritis. So just this gaining weight around the tummy is not a seemingly innocuous, just sort of a cosmetic issue. It has very, very significant health problems. Data from around 30-40 years ago, this is from a place in the US actually, in the northeastern United States, Framingham, and they've done studies on people where they followed them up for 20 years, and what they showed was that between the ages of 30 and 40, each half a kilo of weight that you gain meant that your risk of dying at the age of 60 to 70 increased by 1%. In other words, if you maintained your weight like you did when you were 20 or 30 years old, your risk of dying was of course there, but the more weight you gained, the risk of dying over and above that basal rate was increased. And between the ages of 50 and 60, again, the gaining weight at that age led to a further increase in mortality. Mortality is the risk of dying. So weight gain that occurs is not good for our health. Now, why would that happen? This link between the weight gain and the increased risk of heart attack and stroke was actually very much like the 6 blind men, describing the elephant. I think everybody knows this famous story. Each person describes what he thinks the elephant looks like just based on the feel. So some people said that it was long and thin like a snake. Other people felt it was, broad and like a lotus leaf because he was feeling the ear. Ultimately, now we have come to understand. So this description of this increased body weight, we knew that gaining weight, particularly around the tummy, led to increased blood sugars. We knew that it led to increased blood pressure. We knew that it caused high cholesterol. We knew that it was associated with increased risk of heart attack and stroke. But ultimately, what people realized over a period of time was that all of it was linked by this excess body fat, particularly the body fat that you gain around the tummy area. This same increase in body fat that occurs, what we call the visceral body fat or the increased tummy body fat, is what is responsible for many, many problems, including high sugar, pressure. It causes some abnormal thickening of the blood vessel walls. It causes abnormal clotting of the blood, high cholesterol, all of which in turn leads to the increased risk of a heart attack and stroke. I want to talk a little bit about fat balance. Now, fat is something that is very important for us. I've been talking a lot about how that lady gained weight. Fat balance is important because you need the right amount of fat in the right place. You can have too much fat, and I think it's fairly obvious that if you gain a lot of weight all over your body, you're going to have problems. This type of what we call morbid obesity, where people weigh 150, 160 kilograms, can lead to problems like arthritis, of course diabetes, high blood pressure. They develop a lot of skin problems. You can see that the skin folds are rubbing against each other. So morbid obesity, where your weight is that high, does cause a lot of problems. This is just really excess fat in the body. However, the opposite is also true. When you have too little fat, and here I'm showing pictures of two people who don't have enough fat, that also causes the exact same problems, interestingly. So we do need a certain minimum amount of fat. So this is a gentleman, you can see that his cheeks are very hollowed out. This is because he's taking certain medications which makes you lose fat from your body. He's taking this for treatment of a particular type, a very serious type of a virus infection. So it is not something that we would recommend routinely. It's a life-saving drug, but the trade-off is that he's losing the fat from his body. This is a child who is only about, I think, 1 or 2 years old at the time this photo was taken. And you can see that this child has absolutely no body fat. You can see that the muscles are like this, well developed and well defined. And you don't expect a child to look like a bodybuilder. This is because this child was born with a very rare condition. At birth itself, some of them are born without any body fat. It's a very rare genetic problem. Interestingly, when the body has too little fat also, it causes the same exact problems as we would expect with too much fat also. Too much fat also leads to high blood sugars and high cholesterol. And these two people also have the same problem of high blood sugar and high cholesterol. So you need the right amount of fat in your body. That is very important for us to understand. Too little is also bad, too much is also bad. And having the right amount of fat but in the wrong place is also bad. This is just a picture to show that particularly when you gain weight around the tummy area, what is called the so-called male pattern of obesity or the apple shape. It has been classically described as the apple shape. So gaining weight around the midriff causes multiple medical problems, whereas gaining weight in the lower part of the body, what is called the pear-shaped or the women types of weight gain or gynoid obesity, does not seem to be associated with that many medical problems. So it is this weight gain, particularly around the midriff, which is what is responsible for this big epidemic that we are facing nowadays of diabetes and insulin resistance and the multiple problems I told you about. So coming back to our the little story I told you earlier of this girl, I just put up her vital statistics here. This is when she was 17, this is when she was 32, and this is when she is 55. And you can see that she has gained a lot of weight, particularly around the tummy area. You can see what has happened to her waist circumference. It has gone up and up and up. And this number below this is what is called your waist-hip ratio. It is considered one of the single most important markers of your risk of developing diabetes and heart problems. All you do is, like your tailor measures you, you have to measure yourself around your waist, around the navel area, and measure yourself around the hip. And you take the ratio of the waist circumference to the hip circumference. Normal for Indian women has to be below 0.8. So this is what this girl was when she was 17 years old, very healthy. But the problem was starting even then. By the time she had entered her 30s, the waist-hip ratio had significantly gone up, particularly after childbirth. And by the time she was in her 50s, very much higher. So she gained a lot more weight. So her waist and her hip were pretty much the same circumference. So you can see the ratio is up to 1. So the ratio of the waist and the hip is the same. So this is the problem. This gaining weight around the tummy was what had caused her to develop initially just very slightly irregular periods, which nobody worried about. Then she developed diabetes in pregnancy. Then in between that, by the time she was in her 40s, she developed full-blown diabetes. And finally, she had a heart attack. So this is what is called insulin resistance. It's also been called syndrome X or the metabolic syndrome. And what it is a combination of gaining weight, particularly around the tummy, obesity, which in turn causes excess blood sugar, high blood pressure, and high blood cholesterol. All of which in turn leads to the increased risk of a heart attack or a stroke. And the reason this has really gained prominence or has really come to attention in the past few years is because around the world, more and more populations are developing this insulin resistance. Even populations where traditionally they were protected against all of these conditions because they are exposed to different types of foods and lack of adequate exercise. More and more people are developing this insulin resistance. So this is a problem. It was initially described in the US, in America. It is a big problem in Europe. It is a huge, huge problem in India and in China and in other countries all around the world, whichever country you take. Probably only, in a place where starvation is common, say sub-Saharan Africa, you would not see this to such a great extent. But any place, and there are many, many indicators which say which are the populations that are at risk of developing the syndrome X or metabolic syndrome. One of the indicators is, for example, the urbanization index. So the more paved roads your village or your town is going to have, the more likely you are to develop this syndrome. The more fast food shops you have, as expected, you're more likely to develop this. The population there is more likely to develop it. So basically, this is what happens with modern living. Now, why does excess body fat lead to all of these problems? I mean, I've spoken a lot about how gaining weight is bad, but why exactly does it do it? Do we think that fat is just something which is sitting there, an inert substance? Why does just gaining that fat cause problems? Fat normally is actually a very, very active organ. It's an active endocrine organ actually. It happens to be a storehouse for the most efficient form of energy. When I say efficient form of energy, fat is the one where even if you burn up a little bit of fat, you get a lot of calories. To gain the same amount of calories from either carbohydrate or protein, which are the other two sort of energy sources, you would have to burn double the amount or double the weight of fat to get the same amount of energy. So fat is a very, very efficient form of storing energy. It is also a support for our internal organs. If you don't have fat, you can see that it's a protection for the liver, protection for the intestine, and in very young children, it also plays a big role in temperature regulation. But fat is more than just a lump of lard. It's not just a lump of butter or fat just sitting there inactive. Like I said earlier, it is a very, very active endocrine organ. I just put up this picture to show you. This, I think this was a slide which was made about 12 years ago. At last count, it is estimated that the fat in our body makes about 500 different types of hormones and chemicals and enzymes, and it is a very, very, very active factory actually. Probably one of the most active factories. So it is not just a lump of lard which is sitting there. It is a very active endocrine organ, constantly responding to changes in our body and making a lot of hormones. So I just want to take a minute to think about how we can change the storyline of this young girl. Or in fact, if we can even change the storyline. To put that in perspective, I just want to talk a little bit about how our concept of health has really changed in the last 100 or 120 years. If we sort of look at healthcare about 100 years ago, the chances of surviving childhood illness was very low. We did not have vaccinations, we did not have antibiotics. So I'm talking about, say, 1900s, 1910s. So people who were healthier were self-selected and lived to adulthood. But even in adulthood, tuberculosis killed many people. And if they managed to survive, you know, these infectious diseases or other infections of childhood, and they lived up to old age, then the common killers were, like now, strokes and heart attacks and cataracts, and there weren't the great medicines we have now to treat cholesterol and high blood pressure. So people died before they got a chance to be treated or even cured. Even by about 50 years ago, the chances of surviving to adulthood were high because antibiotics and vaccines had been found. The cure for tuberculosis had just been found, but people were still dropping dead of strokes and heart attacks. Now, if we sort of fast forward to today, a lot of us have a very good chance of surviving to adulthood and beyond. And treatment for very common old age concerns are available. There's treatment for heart problems, for strokes, for arthritis, for cancer. So we have a lot of the treatment for old age concerns. But more than ever, people are concerned about their health. What is called the worried well. We are all healthy, we are well, but we keep worrying about our health. And the converse of it is that a lot of the burden of the human diseases that we face today is because of our lifestyle, because of our diet, and because of our environment, which is both good and bad. Of course, we bring it upon ourselves, but it also means that a lot of the diseases that we bring upon ourselves is preventable. I think this is the single most important thing that I would like to, if you can take away from this talk, this is the single most important thing, that a lot of these diseases are preventable. So change in healthcare has really changed from symptom relief. So no longer do we go to the doctor because we're having a fever or a pain or a tummy ache or whatever, leg pain, or we got hurt. A lot of the people are going to doctors because we want to remain healthy, to screen for diseases in the very early stage so that we can put in place preventive measures to prevent problems in the long term. This is the definition of health according to the World Health Organization. It is a state of general physical and mental health, mental well-being, and it is not merely absence of disease. So it's very important that we feel well for us to feel healthy. And I think an awareness of health and its maintenance is an equally important component of health. So we are not aware of how healthy we are till we lose it. I think all of us take our health for granted. It's only when we develop some illness, we develop diabetes or we develop arthritis or some other problem, that we realize that we took our health for granted and we didn't really do anything to prevent problems. Again, this is data from the WHO, the World Health Organization, which has said that by the year 2020, over 70% of all of the diseases that mankind faces will be caused by things like cancer and diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and chronic respiratory disease. Just about a week ago, in fact, there was a big document which was put out regarding the problems faced by by populations all over the world due to changes in the climate, the climatic changes which are again man-made. So it is now being said that not only is global warming responsible for things like of course the pollution and global warming is causing problems like increase in lung problems. You've all seen pictures of the smog in Beijing, where people live pretty much in the smog. They have a lot of lung problems. But also because of this global warming, it is causing other problems. It is changing agricultural patterns, it is changing water patterns. So our health is getting affected in many ways because of all the man-made problems that have happened over the past 70 to 100 years. But coming to a more personal level, these are all things that happen at a population level. At a personal level, we put our health at risk because of things like tobacco and alcohol abuse, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, and exposure to environmental carcinogens or cancer-causing chemicals. How do we promote health? So the remainder of the talk, I'm just going to be talking a little bit about the common things that we all know that we can do to take care of our health. Of course, the number one thing is awareness. Be aware of how healthy you are, which means you need to go to the doctor regularly. Definitely after the age of say 30 or 35, I think it's essential that at least once a year you go and check things like the blood pressure, cholesterol and blood sugar. Very simple test to do. You do not need to do a full checkup, but at least at a minimum a blood sugar and blood pressure check is absolutely essential. Taking good care in early life. Now this is very, very important because you can never start too early. They estimate even, nowadays people estimate that a lot of the problems that people face by the time they are in their 20s, 30s and 40s actually have their roots stretching back to when they were in their mother's womb. So when they were tiny little fetuses or embryos growing in the mother's womb is when actually all of this problem starts. So taking good care early life, even after birth, from a young age, if you can inculcate these good habits of eating healthy, taking a lot of exercise, from a very young age in children, you can prevent problems later on in life. And regular screening. It is not necessary that you have to go to the doctor only when you have a problem. If you can pick up a problem early enough, definitely we can do a lot to prevent the problem from happening in the first place. Screening is actually defined as looking for a condition when it is not causing symptoms. It is important to be aware that the disease can be prevented, which is why a lot of the screening, for example, for things like breast cancer, cervical cancer is all recommended. Screening for these conditions, if picked up at an early enough stage, means that you can prevent the disease from developing. The problem is commonly we either have one of two mentalities. Ostrich mentality, I don't want to know, I feel well. When I feel unwell, I'll find out about it. I don't want to do anything. Or the other thing is, I will do it tomorrow. I'll put it off. I'm okay. What's going to happen? I'll do it tomorrow. So both of these things means that a lot of diseases are picked up at a very late stage. Of course, there may be reasons why, say financial reasons or social reasons why some people cannot go to seek medical help till it is too late. But a lot of times it is because of these two self-imposed reasons. Either you don't want to know or you're just putting it off. And just to point out that it's why it is important to go to the doctor early, I've just put up this figure to say that when you're in your 30s, your blood sugar levels may go up a little bit. So this is your fasting blood sugar level. It is still remaining within the normal range and you won't have any symptoms. By the time in your 40s, again, you're not going to have any symptoms, even though your blood sugars are slightly higher. By the time you reach your 50s, this is when you start having complaints. But you may still not go to a doctor because you may just have a bit of giddiness and dizziness and then it will settle. And then when you're in your late 50s or 60s is when you present with problems, say a heart attack or a stroke. But the problem didn't happen suddenly. So they will say, oh, I've been healthy all my life, doctor. How did it suddenly happen? It didn't suddenly happen. It started 20, 30 years ago, which means that we need to have good screening practices. If at this point in time, the awareness of health had been there, you took good care, mainly lifestyle changes, a lot of good exercise, dietary changes, and regular monitoring of sugars, this may have been prevented very definitely. There are certain things you can screen for example, for diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol. You can screen for things like risk of fractures in older age group. More and more, particularly women, but equally important for men. It's important that they do what is called a bone density test to see what is the health of their bones. The risk of glaucoma, cataracts can be screened for. The risk of developing certain types of cancers can be screened for. So there are things that we can screen for and treat at a very early stage. Now I spoke about this earlier. Most chronic diseases are caused by a combination of getting older, gaining weight, particularly around the tummy, lack of physical activity, and our genetic makeup. Now these two things we can't do anything about. We are all going to get older and we are born with the genes that we have. We cannot change these two things. But these are the two things that we need to absolutely work on. This gaining weight and lack of physical activity. Even the weight gain is not a major issue. This is the number one. If we remain physically active, it doesn't matter about your weight. It's very essential to remain physically active. And the only tip regarding exercise is keep moving all the time. Just keep moving all the time. You know, you see a 1 or a 2-year-old, the child is running about all the time. The child never sits. And you wonder where that child gets that energy to keep running around. It's only an adult who keeps sitting down. That is the problem. We have to be like we were when you were 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, running about all the time. You've seen people who run about a lot, the ones who are very, very active. They generally tend to be very thin and very unlikely to have any health problems. But at a minimum, we need to ensure that we are at least walking for about 45 minutes to an hour a day. It doesn't have to be done at a stretch. So for example, people who have severe arthritis, you can do a 10 to 15 minute walk 3 to 4 times a day. So it can be cumulative. More and more people now have what are called pedometers. Pedometers measures the number of steps you take in a day. Even a lot of the smartphones have it. You can download an app. It's a free app. See whether you can take about 8,000 to 10,000 steps in a day. Very essential. 10,000 steps a day, it has been estimated, can prevent a lot of health problems later on in life. 10,000 steps a day won't make you lose weight, but it can prevent problems. And as many days of the week as possible. And it's not enough. There are people who go to the gym for say 45 minutes a day and the rest of the day they are a couch potato. That is also not at all healthy. So it's important to be active all through the day. You also go to the gym but also stay active the rest of the time. And of course there are lots of tips for exercise. We have to enjoy what we do. Try and vary the exercise routine. You can set goals so that, because some people work better with goals, or at least enjoy what you do. Weights and resistance training is very important, particularly for women, because we generally have less muscle mass to begin with, and a lot of the traditional activities that women used to do earlier, which would keep their, particularly the back muscles, the upper back muscles and what is called your core muscles active. So things like, I'm talking about the Indian cortex, so things like grinding, drawing water from the well, bending down. I mean, these types of activities we don't do at all nowadays. So those muscles atrophy, and it causes a lot of problems with our ability to burn calories. So it's important that we consider doing some amount of resistance training, or at least the type of exercise which would keep those muscles also active. For example, lifting your hands above your head several times, or just waving your arms up and down several times. Even if you do that for about 15 seconds, you'll realize that the upper part of your back is hurting. That's because those are muscles we don't use at all. And certainly if you're starting to exercise for the first time after the age of 45 or 50, make sure that you're in good health before you start doing something very vigorous. A lot has been said about food. I think basically the bottom line is have as little sugar as possible, as less fat as possible. So no sugar, low fat, lots of fruits and vegetables. And again, I always say that there was a big study done which showed that Indians apparently worldwide, they did a study among different populations in the world, Indians have the lowest intake of fruits and vegetables. We tend to eat a lot of rice and a lot of sambar, or the carbohydrate is very high, but very, very little fruits and vegetables. Nuts are very helpful. Nuts are helpful even if you have cholesterol, especially when you have high cholesterol. Nuts contain what is called good fat, and it helps to reduce your body's bad cholesterol. Dairy products are good if it is tolerated. So you do not gain weight because you take milk and curd. You do not gain weight if you take milk and curd. I'm repeating it because this is such a common misconception. People normally say, oh, I'm not taking milk, doctor, because I'm gaining weight. But it is very, very good for you. In fact, the more milk you have, the less weight you're going to gain. And any food that your body does not require at that point in time is basically what I would say is junk food. So it is important that we listen to our body signals, eat what your body tells you to eat at that point in time. So in the summer months, you would be more likely to eat, lots of like things like watermelon and melon, because it contains a lot of liquid, maybe tender coconut water. And in the winter months, you would be eating more fatty things, more things like nuts, because it's going to burn up more calories and help you body in temperature regulation. So it's important that we listen to our body and eat what it is telling us to eat at that point in time, generally. Everybody is worried about the weight, and there are certain sort of facts that we cannot get over. In general, our body is geared towards maintaining weight. So once we get to a certain weight, it's very difficult to lose that, because the whole part of our brain, which is focused on the maintenance of weight, will do whatever it takes to maintain the weight at that point in time. So it's very difficult to override that. And we also need to remember that we definitely need less and less food as we grow older. We cannot expect to eat at the age of 40 or 50 as we used to do when we were 15 or 16. We do not need that much food. So consciously we have to eat less the older we grow. Weight loss has to be both diet-based and exercise-based. Remember that healthy eating habits begin in childhood. Even as a child, it's not necessary that you have to add 2 spoons of sugar to the milk to get your child to drink the milk. You know, children are not born with a taste of sugar. We make them develop the taste or the liking for sugar. They are not born saying, I want sugar. Children are fine. You know, mother's milk is not that sweet. So healthy eating habits begin in childhood. And remember that losing even 5% of your current weight is helpful. It is not at all about your weight. What is more important is your lifestyle. Are you eating healthy? Are you exercising regularly? And how fit you are? These are the 3 things that you need to focus on. People have common concerns regarding tobacco and alcohol. No amount of tobacco is safe. So even 1 cigarette a day is bad. So tobacco is bad. For alcohol, a glass of wine or a peg of other spirits a day may not be harmful. It may be helpful. But any amount in excess of this is probably more risky than any benefit it would convey. So in general, no smoking definitely. Stress causes a lot of problems. There have been many studies which have shown that people who are stressed out, unhappy, have an increased risk of dying. One of the things which may be a little bit simplistic, is that stress causes increased cortisol, which in turn makes you gain weight around the tummy, which in turn increases the risk of heart attacks. Stress is known to depress immunity, which increases risk of cancers. Feeling of not being in control of your life is the biggest stressor for most people. To some extent, some of us can control the source of stress. So we have to identify what is the source of stress. Is it our work? Is it the travel, daily travel? Is it the chores of daily living? Is it our family? Is it our health? Exercise is a wonderful way to reduce stress. We need to be able to place things in perspective. And it's important that even when we are physically unable, if we keep our mind active and healthy, you can reduce the stress. And finally, again, like I mentioned earlier, health is something that we do not appreciate until we lose it. So please do not take it for granted. Eat less and exercise more. I think it's very easy to say that, but it's important that we implement it. Remember to visit your doctor at least once a year after the age of at least 30 or 35 years. And it is good to pick up problems at an early stage. So I think I've come to the end of my talk. I'll finish with that. And if there are any questions, please, I think, type it into the box and send it in. Yeah? Okay.
Participants, we have a Q&A sessions. Request you to type in your questions in the question box and the answers will be given. You can type in the questions if you have any.
Is there a question? You can't see it.
If we stop exercise after performing for a period, will it make us fat?
Sorry, I couldn't read that. If we stop?
If we stop exercise after performing for a period, will it make us fat?
Okay, so the question is, if we stop exercising after performing for a period of time, will it make us fat? Now, it is important to remember that exercise and exercise for weight reduction has to continue. It is not a matter of saying that it's not like taking tablets for a fever. You can't just take it for 5 days and stop. So maintaining an active, healthy lifestyle is very important. It is not because you've exercised and stopped that you're gaining the weight. If you don't exercise, you will tend to gain weight, very definitely, because you're not burning up that amount of calories.
What is the measure of ideal weight and waist size?
and waist size. Okay, so then another question is, what is the measure of ideal weight and waist size? Ideal weight earlier measures were what is called the BMI, or the body mass index, which is the ratio of the weight to the height. More and more people are now using what is called the waist hip ratio, or the waist circumference. So the waist hip ratio ideally has to be below 0.8 for Indian women and below 0.9 for Indian men. So probably the one thing to remember is just the waist hip ratio. So another question is, does stress cause acidity and ulcer formation? Very definitely. Earlier it was thought that stress was one of the only reasons, but I think stress causing the symptoms of acidity, not so much ulcer formation, but the symptoms of acidity happen because of poor eating habits. So eating things which are not in keeping, or which upsets your tummy, is what is going to cause acidity problems. But stress very definitely can increase acidity.
Till how many months a pregnant lady can continue 45 minutes of exercise?
There's a question about pregnancy and exercise. Till how many months in pregnancy can a person continue to exercise 45 minutes daily? See, currently the guidelines, I think, say that you can exercise pretty much even till the day the baby is born. You have to be guided by how your body feels at that point in time. If you're a person who is very athletic and very fit, you can certainly continue to exercise unless you have a medical condition that is preventing you from exercising. If the doctor's advice saying you have to be at bed rest, then you may not need to, you should not be doing it. But otherwise, you can maintain a routine level of physical activity even till the day that you deliver.
Is there any way we can tell that it is stress that is hurting us? We may feel we are not stressed, or feel otherwise. Is there any way people can feel the stress?
There is a question about, I think, is there any objective way to determine how stress is affecting your body? Now, stress is a very, very subjective phenomenon. And even though there are studies which have been done looking at the effects of stress on other parameters, like for example, they've taken, exam going students and studied their blood cells during an exam, before an exam, after an exam, things like that. So assuming that the exam is causing the stress, there isn't a single objective way to say that you are under stress or you're not under stress. It is a very, very subjective phenomenon. If you feel stressed out, you are under stress.
She's 28 years, developed weight around her tummy last couple of years, and she remains very lazy and busy and don't feel like working out because of it.
So there's a question about how someone has gained weight and feels tired and loss of energy and does not feel like working out. Again, I mean, in a person, any person who feels tired and fatigued, particularly in a woman, young women, common things need to be looked at, like your hemoglobin level, your iron level, your thyroid level, your vitamin D level, because these are all common reasons for fatigue and tiredness. Quite often we find that all of these are normal, and lack of exercise itself is the single most important factor for feeling tired and lethargic. So once you start exercising, you will feel better, provided all of these other factors are normal.
Can you please provide some light on PCOS, PCOD, common lifestyle disease, and insulin imbalance which causes?
Yeah. So, in the story that I was talking about, this 17-year-old girl who developed irregular periods, the reason I put that up is because she probably has PCOS or polycystic ovary syndrome, or sometimes it's called polycystic ovary disease. The same excess weight gain around the tummy, which causes the body's insulin to not work properly, also is responsible for this polycystic ovaries. So the insulin has to work properly at the level of the ovaries to make sure that your ovaries make a proper egg every month and you get a period every month. When that insulin is not able to work properly at the level of the ovaries, the first thing that happens is you get irregular periods. As time goes on, if that insulin is not also able to work properly at the level of the liver, at the level of the fat, then you start developing things like high blood sugar, diabetes, and so on and so forth. So it is very important that young girls, but it's important that we don't jump in and label everybody with irregular periods as PCOS. But if they have PCOS, it's important that they're counseled. A lot of times they come for cosmetic reasons. They come either because they're having excess hair growth or acne, but it's also important that they need to be aware that in future life they may be at risk of developing diabetes and cholesterol. So lifestyle changes that start at that age need to be implemented and kept up.
Can household chores be considered as vigorous exercise?
Household chores, can it be considered as vigorous exercise is a question. And the answer is it depends on how vigorously you're doing it, I suppose. It is a very good form of exercise. Like I mentioned earlier, the more active you are, the better it is. However, if you're looking at just doing household chores to lose weight, it will not happen. Remember that your body gets used to any type of physical activity very quickly. So even if you're going to the gym for about 6 months, your body gets used to it. So you may have a little bit of weight reduction initially with any new physical activity, which is more than what you're doing, but your body quickly gets used to that increased level of physical activity. So doing household chores, for example, sweeping, mopping, washing the clothes, bending down, going up and down the stairs, very definitely will keep you in good health. But will it help you lose weight? Unlikely.
Any more questions, please? Thank you. We've come to the end of the session. Thank you for the participants for logging in, and my hearty thanks for Dr. Jayashree ma'am for being here and giving us such an informative session for our IWN members. Thank you so much.
Thank you.